You are holding a baby. It is freezing cold. There is no doctor, no medicine, no food except what your own body can make. And every single animal within a mile can hear it crying. How did any of them survive? For decades, scientists looked at ancient burial sites and saw something terrifying. Enormous numbers of infant remains, tiny bones carefully buried, stacked in layers going back thousands of years. So they made an assumption. Prehistoric babies died constantly. Ancient parents were helpless. Survival was basically a coin flip. That number became famous. Roughly 40% of all babies born in prehistoric populations did not survive their first year. That figure spread through textbooks, through documentaries, through every conversation about how brutal ancient life must have been. But then someone asked a better question. What if those numbers were wrong? What if the high number of infant graves did not mean babies were dying at higher rates? What if it just meant more babies were being born? Because here is the thing about burial data. It does not measure how well parents cared for their children. It measures how many children were being born. More births mean more deaths, even if the survival rate stays exactly the same. Once researchers recognized that, the entire framework shifted. Ancient infant care stopped looking like a failure. It started looking like something worth understanding. So what did ancient parents actually do? The answer is not one thing. It is a system, a layered, community-based, surprisingly effective system that humans built over hundreds of thousands of years. And when you look at it closely, it does not look primitive at all. It starts with the most important thing any caregiver could do: feed the baby. Breast milk was not a preference back then. It was the difference between life and death. It carried immune protection, antibodies, living cells, enzymes that a newborn body cannot produce on its own. Formula did not exist. If the mother could not nurse, finding another woman who could was one of the most urgent problems a group could face. Some of the oldest employment contracts ever discovered are for wet nurses. Ancient parents did not just understand that breast milk mattered. They built social systems around making sure babies could always get it. Among the Kungsan of Botswana, one of the most studied hunter-gatherer groups on Earth, infants nursed dozens of times per day. Short bursts constantly, almost every hour. 90% were still nursing into their second year, 75% into their third, 3 years old and still nursing. Because stopping too early was dangerous, and the people who had survived long enough to raise children knew it. Now here is the part that nobody talks about. Ancient mothers did not raise babies alone, not even close. Researchers studying 5 different hunter-gatherer societies across Africa, Australia, South America, and the Philippines found that mothers provided only about half of all infant care. Half. The other half came from fathers, grandmothers, older siblings, and other members of the group who had no biological reason to help but helped anyway. On any given day, a single infant might be held, carried, or watched by up to 15 different people. This practice has a name: alloparenting, and researchers now believe it may be one of the defining features of human evolution. Most primates raise their young almost exclusively through the mother. Humans share the work. And that sharing was not optional. It was essential. More hands meant the infant was never left alone. More hands meant more warmth, more feeding, more protection. More hands also meant the mother could sleep, eat, recover, and keep producing the milk the baby needed. The village was not a metaphor. It was the survival plan. But there was another problem: heat. Newborns are terrible at staying warm. A small human body generates heat poorly and loses it fast. In a world with no heated rooms and no insulation, warmth came from one place only: another body. In every hunter-gatherer society ever studied, mothers and infants slept in direct contact, skin to skin, on the same surface, through the night. That contact was not sentiment. It was engineering. Skin contact regulated the baby's temperature without burning the baby's own energy reserves. It regulated breathing. It sent constant signals to the newborn nervous system that the environment was safe and the mother was present. Remove that contact and the baby cries, loses heat, burns calories it cannot spare. Maintain it and the baby sleeps, grows, and survives another night. Across cultures and thousands of years, ancient caregivers also discovered that wrapping the baby tight made it sleep longer. Swaddling appears in ancient Mesopotamia 4,000 years ago, in ancient Greece, in Rome, in indigenous communities across North America, South America, Asia, and Africa. The materials changed: linen, wool, plant fiber, animal skin. But the principle was always the same. A wrapped baby holds warmth better. A wrapped baby is easier to carry, and a wrapped baby does not startle itself awake. Newborns have an involuntary reflex that jolts them out of deep sleep at any sudden sensation. Swaddling suppresses it: lower cortisol, longer sleep, more growth. Ancient caregivers discovered this through observation alone and passed it down across thousands of years of shared knowledge. Now here is the part that surprised even the archaeologists. When babies needed more than breast milk, ancient parents in early farming communities built something to feed them. A bottle, not plastic, fired clay, small enough to fit in an infant's hand, shaped with a narrow spout, sized specifically for a baby's mouth. Archaeologists found these vessels in Bronze Age graves across Europe, buried beside the children who had used them. They ran chemical residue analysis on the insides. Animal milk, thousands of years old, still detectable. Some were decorated, painted with care by hands that knew exactly who they were making them for. The act of placing a baby's feeding bottle in the grave is not a ritual detail. It is a statement. It says this object mattered. It says this child mattered. These were not people stumbling through parenthood with no idea what they were doing. These were people who identified a problem, built a tool to solve it, and grieved when the child who needed that tool was gone. What is remarkable is the consistency. These solutions, intensive nursing, alloparenting, skin contact, swaddling, and supplemental feeding, appeared across cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years. People who never met and never shared a written word all arrived at the same answers. Not because the answers were obvious, because the problem was the same. A newborn human is among the most helpless creatures on Earth. Every vulnerability a baby has is a problem that had to be solved, and ancient humans solved every single one of them. Ancient infant mortality was real. Disease, famine, difficult births. Those killed children that no amount of care could have saved. But the idea that ancient parents were helpless is not supported by any of the evidence. The ceramic bottle placed carefully in a grave beside a child in Bronze Age Europe. The nursing pattern maintained into a child's 3rd year. The 15 hands that held a single infant through one day on the African savannah. These are not signs of a primitive people struggling to survive. These are the signs of a species that figured out how to protect the most vulnerable version of itself and kept figuring it out generation after generation for hundreds of thousands of years. That is how it started.